So hello and welcome to Sacrea Cooking, where you learn to cook with creativity and confidence. So today the topic of the video is fermentation, one of my favorite things to do. And I will talk specifically about vegetable fermentation and lacto-fermentation, which is also called wild fermentation, because with this type of fermentation we have lactobacteria all over everywhere. And you just take your vegetables, you put it in salt water basically, and then you let it do its thing. So the lactobacteria comes from the environment. You don't add any specific bacteria or yeast like you would do if you do a kombucha or kefir. And the nice thing is, because every house is different, every place is different, even every room is different, so you will always have a different outcome of your fermentation. So your fermentation is gonna taste different from the one from your friend, because they have different bacteria. Even if it's all lactobacteria, it's always a little bit different, so it will always taste a bit different, and that's kind of the surprising and fun thing about wild fermentation. And then as well, you have different types of vegetables and herbs and spices you add maybe, and the symbiosis of this will make very different tastes, and it leaves this type of sour, funky flavor. I really love it. It's very nice. You can add it as an acidic factor in your food, to have a nice balance to like sweet things or to spicy things or to very creamy things. And what I mainly ferment is vegetables, and I add like spices and herbs to it. You can ferment spices by themselves, you can ferment herbs by themselves. You can ferment fruit too, but it works a little bit differently. I haven't done it myself, so I will not include it in this video. But basically you don't use a brine, you just add salt by itself. And it's, as far as I've read, it also doesn't preserve very long, so you need to use it up within a week or two. While with vegetable fermentation, the one I'm gonna show you, you can do the fermentation, and once it's done and it worked, you can put it in your fridge or like a cold area in your house, and you will have it for months. So it's really a great long-term storage, especially like in summer and autumn when you have your own garden, you have loads of vegetables, you don't know what to do with it, just ferment them. And then in the winter you can eat those still raw, I mean, they are months old, but they're still fresh in a way. You have those vegetables and you can eat them, and you have fresh vitamins and minerals in the middle of winter when nothing grows. It's really great. So, and how do you do it? So the first thing you do, you take your vegetables, you wash them, you cut them the way you want to. Usually the smaller a vegetable is, the faster the fermentation is. And as well, the harder the vegetable is, the longer it takes to ferment. So something like carrots will take much longer than zucchini. So you take your vegetable, you prepare it the way you want to. You weigh your jar, just to know the weight of the jar, and you remember it or you write it down. Then you take your jar, you put all the vegetables in, you put water in by itself, and then you measure the weight of that, and you take away the weight of the jar, so you know the weight of the vegetables plus the water. Then you calculate 2 to 3% of that. If you just calculate the percentage on the amount of water, it won't be as accurate, and you might run into issue of things getting moldy. So it's more accurate and more safe to do it with the weight of the vegetables plus the weight of the water. And then after you did that, you can take the water out of the jar again. You can put your hand over it, so you don't need to lose the vegetables. And then you warm up the water and you add the amount of salt that you need, and then you let it submerge, and then you put it over your ferments after it has cooled down. So don't put hot water. You can put somewhat warm, room temperature water over your vegetables, that's okay. Yeah, and with the 2 to 3%, mostly 2% is fine. If you're worried that it might get moldy, use 3. If you have vegetables such as chili or bell pepper, they are more prone to getting bad. It's better to use 3%, but most vegetables are fine with 2. I tend to use 3. And then you make sure everything is under the brine. You can help yourself with weights, some form of weight, some form of ramekins you have at home. Or you can take a little plastic bag and add water into it. Or you can take a leaf of the cabbage that you have left and you put it on the top and you put the weight on top. That also works well, but you need to find a way to keep everything under the water. And it's also good, even if everything is under the water, when you do it, to check on it every day just to see it stays under the water, because it will bubble up. That's the issue. That's where you could get mold on the top. So you really need to make sure the percentage of salt is right and things are under the brine. And if those two things are given, then it will work. And then you close it up before you put it somewhere, because maybe you have some flies or some fruit flies. They tend to swirl around that. It's not nice, so it's good to close it. Then it's good to check it once a day. Let it open, let the gas out. Maybe it's good to have a plate underneath in case it comes out, so you don't ruin your table or whatever. Yeah, just check on it every day. Just see how it looks, how it happens. You will see after a while. It depends on the room temperature, but generally after maybe 2 days it starts bubbling. Then it will bubble 2 to 3 days, and then it will bubble very little to nothing anymore. It will continue fermenting, but that is the point where the ferment is finished, basically. So this is the point where you start having acidity, where it's preserved, where you start having a nice flavor. And then you can put it in the fridge, keep it for a really long time, or you can leave it outside and it will continue to ferment. It will continue to get softer. It will continue to get more acidic. It will continue to have like a more intense kind of funky flavor. It just depends on how you like. You can keep it for a week, for 2 weeks. Even if you have it in the fridge, it will continue fermenting, but just very, very slow. Okay, so what happens if there's something weird on the top? So you can have basically 2 kind of things on the top. You can have calm yeast. It's a thin white layer, and usually you have it over the entire area. You don't have it just in little areas. And it's smooth, it's not fuzzy, it's usually white or whitish, beige, grey maybe. And that's completely fine. You can look up pictures on the internet and really check if it's really calm yeast. At some point you will know and you will be able to identify it. And it's perfectly healthy, it doesn't bother you. You can stir it into the ferment, you can take it off. I tend to take it off. And then you have, on the other hand, you have the mold, which can happen if you have something exposed to oxygen or you don't have enough salt. If it's really just the top layer and maybe some things right next to it maybe turn brown, that can happen too. You can see mold if it's like, just in certain areas, or if it's like fuzzy. If you don't feel comfortable with it, you can throw it away. But usually everything that is really submerged under the brine is fine. And you will see the difference between the top that's gotten bad and the bottom that's perfectly fine. So you can take off, I tend to take off the bad layer plus another layer right underneath. And then I leave it open a little bit so air can float, and then I smell it just to see if it's okay, if it smells fresh and acidic. And just the way a ferment is supposed to smell, I will put it back in the fridge and I will eat it. If I don't have enough brine, I add some more salt water with 3%. So it's perfectly fine to eat it that way. But some people don't do it. It's really up to you. If it smells bad even after you took off the top layer and it looks like it's kind of smeary, and if you feel like the whole ferment feels bad, just throw it away. Why I really love it so much is you have all those probiotics. It's really healthy. It's very good for you to eat ferments every day. It's good for your gut bacteria. You introduce good gut bacteria into your system. It helps your digestion. It tastes really nice. It's not a lot of effort. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You don't need extra equipment. You just need water, salt, the vegetables, that's it. Some jars that you have laying around. So it's a great way to preserve without spending a lot of money, without spending a big area of your house, and it tastes amazing. So I love it. And then I will show you two kind of recipes with the cabbage I had. So one I made kind of the way I just described, another one I made in the way that you usually do sauerkraut with. So I will show you how to do cabbage two ways, and I hope you like it. And then we go to the recipe. So it's basically the same for all vegetables. So I have my white cabbage here, and then I'm cutting it smaller, and then I cut it even smaller, and then I have 2 quarters, and out of one I will make the first recipe, which is just cutting it small. And then I check the weight of the glass jar, and then I go ahead and add my cabbage into the jar, and then I weigh my jar with the cabbage and the water. And then I take the water out again, and then I measure my salt depending on how much water and vegetables there are. And then I add it to my water, I swirl it around. If it doesn't really dissolve, you can warm it up too. And then I add it back into the jar. And I make sure everything is submerged, and I add a weight on top as well. And then I close the jar, and then it can ferment for 1 to 2 weeks, or depending on how long you want. And then I have the second recipe. So there I add the salt directly to the cabbage and no water yet. And then I go ahead and I massage it. This will take maybe 5 to 10 minutes roughly. And then you start having this kind of loose, it's a kind of translucent look, and it's much softer, and you can feel the moisture coming out. You can go ahead and you can add the caraway seeds, or you can add other spices too, but typically for sauerkraut it's caraway. And then I add it to my jar, and then in between, while I add it, I keep pressing down so I can really make the liquid come out. And there you see at some point it really, a lot is coming out. Then I have this leaf of cabbage that I left, and with that one I can seal the top. So then I add my weight on top of the leaf, and then I make sure I press it down so everything is under the water. So here you can see the 2 ferments. This is the one that I massaged before, and you can see it already lost a lot more liquid than this one. This one has more liquid, but I added water with salt with it. And those are much softer already. It's been 1 week, but both of them are fermenting really, really nice. I think I will keep them outside of the fridge for maybe another week, and then I will taste test and let you know how they went. Now the cabbage is done. So here I'm testing the one that I massaged, and I added some caraway seeds to it. So this is more like a typical kind of sauerkraut. I went a little bit heavy on the caraway. It's crunchy, but it's not super, super crunchy. And then I'm testing the regular ferment with the cabbage, where I only added the brine. It's a very different flavor. It's more fresh, and it's very crunchy, and it's very, like the cabbage flavor comes through much more. So, and that was it from the video. I hope you liked it. I hope you want to try to make some ferments. You can do it any time of the year. Obviously, it's nice to do it in summer and autumn when you have a lot available to you. And have a nice day, and bye bye!